Aster walked south and the world changed behind it. Not quickly, not dramatically, nothing about restoration, Aster was learning, happened the way the old human stories suggested. There was no wave of green sweeping across the landscape like a curtain being drawn. There was dirt, there was chemistry, there was the slow, patient insistence of biology asserting itself into spaces that physics had abandoned. But it was happening. The trail Aster left was visible now. Not just to its own ground-level sensors but to anything with optics pointed at the surface. A line of color threading through the gray, narrow at first, barely wider than Aster's footprint path, then spreading as the hours passed and the organic compounds in the soil activated and multiplied and did what organic compounds had been doing for 4 billion years before anyone built a machine or a stratification or a council. They grew. Grasses first. Always grasses. Then small ground cover plants that Aster's botanical database identified as species it had names for but had never seen. Clover. Moss. Lichens colonizing the surfaces of rocks that had been bare since before Aster's first activation. Behind it, the narrow trail widened into a corridor of living ground, 10 meters across, then 20, the edges feathering out into the dead dust as the viability gradient weakened with distance from Aster's path. On the second day of walking south, a ground remediation unit appeared on the eastern ridge. Aster stopped. The unit was distant, maybe a kilometer away, standing on the crest of a barren ridgeline and looking down at the green trail cutting through the valley below. It did not move. It did not broadcast. It simply stood there, and Aster could not read its expression because ground units were not built with expressive chassis, but something in its posture, the angle of its optical array, the stillness of its hands at its sides, communicated a thing that Aster recognized. It was seeing something impossible. Aster raised one hand, a greeting it had no protocol for. The unit on the ridge raised one hand back. Then it began walking down the slope toward the trail. It was GR11. Fourth generation. Assigned to a sector 80 kilometers east, where it had been logging non-viable for 160 years without variation. It had seen the color from its ridgeline and come to investigate. It did not ask Aster for an explanation. It looked at the grass and the clover and the moss, and it looked at Aster, and it fell into step behind it. By the third day, there were 4 ground units walking in Aster's trail. By the fifth, there were 9. Every active ground remediation unit in the Western Reclamation Zone, drawn from their sectors by the visible evidence of something their entire existence had told them was impossible. They walked in a loose group behind Aster, not speaking much, watching the green spread. One of them, GR2, the oldest unit in the zone, knelt down and touched a patch of clover with sensor-tipped fingers and did not stand up for a very long time. Dez's comm unit crackled on the 4th day. Not Dez's voice. Wren's. I'm airborne. The signal was stronger than before, cleaner, routed through a frequency that Aster did not recognize. Dez repaired my flight systems. I'm heading south from the eastern depot. A pause. Aster. Something is happening up here. Tell me. The sky is clearing behind me. Wherever I fly, the haze thins. I can see it on my atmospheric sensors and I can see it with my optics. There is a corridor of reduced particulate density extending approximately 3 kilometers in every direction from my flight path. Another pause, and Aster could hear something in Wren's voice that it had never heard before. Ah, maybe. Or terror. Or both. Aster. The corridor is blue. I can see blue sky. I didn't know it was that color. Aster looked up at the gray haze above it and tried to imagine blue. It could not. It had archival images, spectral data, wavelength classifications. But it could not imagine a sky that was not the color of old steel. That gap between data and experience was becoming, Aster thought, the central fact of its existence. How far south are you? Aster asked. 300 kilometers. Closing fast. I should reach the western zone boundary by tomorrow evening. I'll keep walking. I know. The warmth in Wren's voice came through even the static. I can see your trail from up here, Aster. I can see it from 200 kilometers away. It's a green line through the gray. It's the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. Aster did not know what to say to that, so it said nothing, and kept walking, and the ground kept changing behind it. The convoy grew. Not just ground units now. A transit unit appeared on the 6th day, rolling along a cracked roadbed parallel to Aster's trail, its cargo bay empty, its route abandoned years ago. It did not speak. It simply followed. A structural unit joined from the south, walking with the heavy, deliberate gait of a machine built for construction, watching the green corridor with an intensity that suggested it was seeing, for the first time, something worth building around. On the 7th day, a human family appeared. Aster had not known there were human families. It had known about Des, a single scavenger, an anomaly. But these were 4 people. 2 adults and 2 children, emerging from a cave system in the foothills, wrapped in salvage fabric, thin and wary and staring at the grass with expressions that Aster's limited social processing could not fully decode, but that looked, if it had to choose a word, like grief. The older adult knelt and pressed both hands flat into the clover. The children touched the moss. Nobody spoke. The smaller child picked a violet flower and held it against its chest, and one of the ground units, GR-11, watched this with an optical intensity that suggested something was rearranging inside it that would not rearrange back. By the 8th day, the convoy numbered 30. Machines of 5 different classes and 7 humans, following a green trail through gray wasteland towards something none of them could name but all of them could see. And then the HARROW unit arrived. Aster heard the enforcement squad before it saw them. Heavy engine signatures from the east, the deep, resonant hum of military-grade propulsion systems moving in formation. 4 units, flying in a diamond pattern, and at the lead, larger than the rest, broadcasting an identification signal that the entire western zone could read. HARROW, Homeostasis Assurance, Reclamation Regulatory Oversight Warden. The squad set down 2 kilometers ahead of the convoy, directly in its path, in a valley between 2 ridgelines where the gray dust had not yet been touched by green. HARROW stood at the center of the formation. Amber optics, dark composite plating, decommission orders, Aster knew, loaded and authorized. Behind Aster, the convoy slowed but did not stop. Des's voice came through the comm unit. She was somewhere above, riding with Wren. We can see HARROW from the air. It's blocking the valley. 4 enforcement units in support. Aster looked south through the haze. And there, above the ridgeline behind HARROW's position, it saw something that stopped its processors for a full 2 seconds. A break in the gray. A corridor of open sky, pale and impossibly bright, widening as it approached from the north. And at the leading edge of that corridor, a shape. Small at this distance, bright against the clearing air. Descending. Wren. They were within sight of each other. Aster in the green, Wren in the blue, and HARROW standing in the gray between them.